We spend most of our time in schools. Okay, so we do all these school outreach and all the school education programs. So that's kind of our role. So, show of hands, how many of you have your driver's licenses? How many of you are getting your permits? How many? Okay, so how many of you have your permits? I'm sorry. Good, good. My son in about 30 minutes will be taking his test to get his permit. Okay, so how many of you are going to get your permits within the next 6 months? Good, fantastic. Okay, so awesome. So this will be very informational for all of you then. You guys will love this then because it's really going to talk a lot about, it's really geared towards newly licensed drivers. And so that's all of you in the room, so it's perfect. Okay, so the first question I have for you is the one that's on the screen here. What do you consider lethal? So when I ask that question, I don't want to put it in the context of driving. So let's look at it in the context of what could kill you now. What is out in society, what is out in the world that could kill you? What do you think? Guns. Now, that's a good point, and I'm glad you brought that up. So, guns. Now, is it the gun or the person using the gun? So it's the person using the gun, right? So if I put a gun on the table, it's not going to kill anybody. But if someone picks it up and has a bad intent to use it, then yeah, we're going to have some problems, right? So it's not the actual thing. So it's the same thing with a car, right? So a car, just sitting in the parking lot, can't hurt anybody. But the person behind the wheel and the person directing that car, that can be lethal. So that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. Another one. Anyone else? Okay. All right. So I'm going to go through a few. We did a survey of your peers, and here's some of the responses. And they are funny and they are campy. Okay, so you can laugh, and I want you to interact. And I want this to be fun for everybody too. Okay, so have fun. It's summer school. Have fun. Okay. All right. So I want you to have fun. Okay. All right. So these are some of the top 4 answers that we got when we surveyed your peers throughout the state. So we had swords, that's weapons, right? Grizzlies, which is animals. Crack, which are drugs. AIDS, disease. And then we've got lip gloss. Now, I like to kind of draw a line through lip gloss and put chapstick or lip balm or something like that because then it's non-gender specific. So think about that. How does that last one, how is that in the same category as all the others? Anyone? What do you think? How could that, this little simple item, be just as dangerous as the others?
Because it causes distracted driving.
Very good. So if you are putting it on or applying it, you may have your eyes distracted. Some would say, no, I don't. I can walk and do that while I'm walking. Okay? Fine. Okay, so some people may not be a distraction. Some people it is a distraction. So that is correct. All right? We also say fixing your hair and people roll their eyes, but we have actually seen people literally blow drying their hair as they're driving on the freeway. And that's a sight to see because that means nothing's touching the steering wheel and the vehicle's moving. Okay? So we've seen that before. We've seen people brush their teeth. We've seen people shave. We've seen people literally have their entire makeup counter on the front seat and they're applying their makeup while they're driving. Okay? So these are all things that we're seeing and these are all bad habits. And I bet you, if I ask this question, how many of you have seen your parents do things like this? Most of you would raise your hands. Okay? Right. Okay, so here's another set. Piranhas. Again, animals, disease, shotguns, poisons, and then lattes. Okay? So coffee beans, Starbucks. How can that be in the same category as the others? Could be, it's a distraction, but what are you doing with your hands? Right, spilling on you. Okay, that's not pleasant at all. Okay, yes sir, in the back.
You're occupying your hands.
Correct. So picture this, and you've all seen it, and I know you've seen it because I know you've seen your parents do it, which is driving a manual transmission, shifting, holding a coffee, and steering. Can't do it. So something has to give. So how many of you seen your parents drive with their knees? A lot of you have. Okay? All right? Some of you that haven't raised your hand, that's good. I'm glad you haven't seen that. But if you have seen it, that's a bad habit. And that's where this latte comes in. Okay? Now, somebody says, well, I have an automatic, so yeah, it's not a big deal. I'm not shifting all the time. But when you're starting to learn how to drive, keep in mind, making a turn sometimes requires using both hands on the steering wheel. Okay? So how do you do that and hold a coffee? You really can't. Alright? So keep that in mind. That's another reason why we threw lattes in there, because it's also a unsafe driving behavior. Okay? So here's another one. For those who don't know what an Uzi is, it's a type of machine gun.
Yeah.
It's a submachine gun. Some people don't know. They always ask, what's an Uzi? Okay, cancer flood. And then texting. Texting, obviously, because why? It incorporates all the previous slides together. So your eyes are off the road, hands off the wheels, and now you've got another factor, which is your mind. You're not focused on your driving. Okay? And that will happen. One of these days you will find yourself driving along and you'll realize, where am I? How did I get there? Okay? Because you're so fixated on whatever the thought is that you're thinking of at that moment in time. Okay? So that's cognitive distraction. And it happens. It happens to us. Okay? It happens to a lot of people. Okay? So that's another thing that we want you to really focus on cognitive distraction. That's not talked a lot about. Alright, so here is a video. These are not actors.
Smoking.
And it's next week, can't be in front,
alcohol,
okay?
forest fires, disease, cancer, domestic violence, all in.
What do I consider lethal? Well, obviously things that kill people.
What do I consider lethal? Leaving your door unlocked and what crazy people can get in?
A shot to the head.
Stupid people with guns. AIDS.
Bombs.
Murderers.
So what do you consider lethal? For most, it's a matter of perspective. It's either the dangers they sense immediately around them, or it's based on an experience they had. We asked random people what they thought was the #1 killer of teens in America. Here's what they said.
#1 killer of teens in America would be...
I would probably say drugs. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Drugs.
drugs. Probably something drug related.
Yeah.
Probably has something to do with guns.
I would say acting stupid.
Monster trucks.
Drunk driving, I guess.
Probably drunk driving.
Drug driving.
Drunk driving.
I would have to say cigarettes.
Gang violence.
Violence. I would have to say negative thinking.
Animals. Smoking crack and getting pregnant.
So some of you are watching this thinking, great, the same old crap we always hear about. Drunk driving, drugs, and the evils of pirated music. But the #1 killer of teens in America is something we've all participated in. Distracted and reckless driving. Seriously, we've all sent a text message while driving. Updated our Facebook, made a playlist, dug through a bag, turned to talk to friends, all while supposedly paying attention to the road. So for the next few minutes, we want to show you the lives that have been shattered by distracted and reckless driving, and the simple things that you can do to avoid becoming a statistic.
A teenager is dead after an overnight accident, and police say speed was a factor.
The cops estimated he was going about 100 miles an hour.
She went in on into another car, and their child was killed also.
And basically, they were just being kids. Drive a little bit fast is all. Good intentions.
A special vigil tonight to remember a standout athlete.
My daughter has lost one of her very dearest friends, her big brother.
I visualized that for years afterwards. He clipped the sidewalk or the curb, went upside down.
Experts say car accidents are the #1 killer of teens nationwide.
I don't have my brother anymore. He's not here. He's not around.
And I heard him say time of death. And I just freaked out.
So what exactly is reckless and distracted driving? Let's put it this way. Anytime you have to take your eyes off the road for any reason, that's distracted driving. And reckless driving, that's speeding and driving like a total idiot. Now for the simple part. How do you keep from needlessly dying in a car crash? That's easy. First, you tell your friends that as much as you love them, to sit down and shut up when you're behind the wheel. If they continue to fool around in your car, Tell them how great they would look with a feeding tube in their stomach. Second, you realize that you decrease the risk of crashing your sweet car by 2,000% when you don't text and drive. Third, you come to terms with the fact that you might have to wake up 2 minutes earlier just so you're not speeding and running stop signs and putting your life and the lives of others at risk, just so you're not late.
Still not exactly sure what reckless and distracted driving is? Let's hear what our resident expert has to say.
Hi everyone, it's Katie here to talk to you about your driving habit. So, here you are driving along with your groups. You got your window down, tunes blaring, giggling like toddlers in a candy shop. When you, the driver, decides to impress your friends with an outlandish display of horsepower. Really? Breaking the speed limit? Risking your life just for kicks and giggles? Come on, people. That's called reckless driving. How about this little scenario? You are a safe driver who never speeds or breaks the law. But as you are driving, you just have to send that important text message about the guy who likes to drop school, or does he know, or does she know, or do you know, or whoopsie daisy, you just hit a telephone pole. Hello, folks! You're driving a 6,000-pound metal beast! Don't you think the latest awesome school gossip was late? That's distracted driving. You drive like that in my hood, my mom will be all up in your girl. Faster than you to say, oh no, she didn't, girlfriend. I gotta run.
Yeah, I think we all learned something today. Everyone gets distracted while driving. So what distracts you?
If I'm reading directions as I'm driving, I get distracted.
Putting on makeup,
Just getting lost in thought and not paying attention to what I'm doing.
Like eating,
drinking, looking for stuff in my purse.
Oh, the beautiful sunset, just staring over there while I'm driving. Other people in the car.
Looking for something on the floor.
I definitely talk on the phone while I drive. And I don't want to admit that I get distracted, but I do.
Probably just music. Should like change my music on my iPod or texting.
Texting, emailing.
Texting,
iPods, talking. Texting. Some people suck at texting when they're driving. I, however, am really good at it.
What you often hear from victims is that they never thought it would happen to them, that their son, daughter, friend, or classmate would be involved in a fatal car crash. And absolutely no one can imagine causing such a tragic event.
Let me tell you about Don.
He was my teammate.
He was my son.
He was a classmate.
He was my best friend.
He was my boyfriend.
My son was my baby boy.
We were just kids, like, having fun.
We were laughing, we were blaring the music up really loud, and I noticed that we were going pretty fast, and it was causing the car to swerve back and forth.
We were like making fun of our time, like, can't you keep the car like in a straight line?
My response was, oh, like this, and I jerked the wheel back and forth. And the next thing I know, I just see a tree coming at us.
I remember like all the sounds of like the car crashing.
I looked around and I see Donovan, but he wasn't moving. So I sat with Bianca. I kept telling her, Donovan's dead. Donovan's dead. I even remember calling out Donovan's name and hoping that he would hear me and just get up.
I saw light laying in his own blood, and I knew for sure that he was gone.
When we walked out, that's what we first said was Donovan didn't make it.
I remember hearing Martha,
Not my son. Not my boy.
and I think that was one of the most painful things to experience, was hearing a mother cry about her son.
The screaming of a mother just now finding out that her son is dead. And all simply because of something that was so preventable.
We were just going home. Speed wasn't really a factor.
Before we knew it, like in a matter of seconds, we lost our best friend.
It was my fault being the driver because I had that responsibility. I would change it if I could.
We were just having fun.
And within a split second,
I lost somebody that meant the world to me. It changed my life forever.
heard the compelling stories. You've seen the stats. And unless you are sleeping or busy worried about what your teacher is wearing today, you understand the simplicity of the message. What is lethal to teens are bad driving habits, something that can be changed, something that can start saving lives today. So now it's your turn. Fill out the I Commit card, visit the website whatdoyouconsiderlethal.com, and help us promote this important cause by participating in the Create Real Impact contest. Most importantly, when you're behind the wheel, focus on the road ahead of you and get where you're going safely. And the reason this is so important to me, my life was shattered by a reckless driver who took the lives of my mom, 2 best friends, and niece while I was pulled from the burning wreckage. I live every day thinking about what could have happened if that driver had chosen to drive differently. Don't let it happen to you.
A little bit more information on her too. I don't know if you noticed she was walking with a limp. She actually, on her left leg, she's missing part of her left leg from the knee down. So that's why, if you notice, when you see her sitting, legs always extended, or she walks with a little bit of a limp. And that was amputated when she was very little. Okay, so the crash actually with her happened when she was really young. I used to bring Martha, Donovan's mom, to this campus and talk to some of you. She has recently retired from public speaking because this just got to be too much for her to come to all the schools and see all of you. And her son would have probably graduated from college by now, okay, or at least being a senior in college. A little bit about the story between Danica and Donovan. Danica fell in love with Donovan in junior high. They actually grew up together. The families were friends, and they grew up together. And if you ask her, she said she fell in love with him when she first laid eyes on him in junior high, like 7th or 8th grade. And he didn't pay attention to her until probably somewhere in high school, like 9th or 10th grade. And so that was, they were probably boyfriend and girlfriend for probably about a year when this collision happened. Okay, so you can imagine how devastated Danica is, right? Even to this day, you may hear her do public speaking, and she'll talk about this. It has changed her life immensely. She's a whole different person. The other interesting fact about this is that Danica was known as the granny driver. She actually was, out of her group of friends, the least likely to be involved in a collision. Because she was the one that never got a speeding ticket, never even got a parking ticket, and she was the first in her group to get her driver's license. The boys in the back seat weren't wearing their seatbelts. They all had their licenses for probably 6 or 7 months. So they couldn't drive the car because why? For the first year, you can't have passengers, right? But Danica had already had her license for a year. Okay? It was like a year and like a month. Okay? So she was like, hey, restrictions are off, so I can have passengers, so I'll drive everybody. And that's exactly what happened. Okay? She actually, they were actually going to take separate cars because of the fact that they were all close in age and none of them could have passengers because of the restriction. And they were all just going to meet at the movie theater. They were going to the movies that night. Like everybody, like all of us have done night after night, hang out with our friends, go to the movies, hang out. Okay, that's exactly what they were doing. And this was actually a couple weeks before the beginning of the semester. So the summer break is winding to an end, and they're getting ready for their senior year. Okay? Donovan also was the star football player. And actually, before Donovan died, the following weekend would have made him eligible to take phone calls from scouts. So those of you that are in sports know there's a blackout period where you cannot be recruited from scouts until your senior year. He was actually, that was his moment. And actually, he had gotten several scholarships and several offers to go to college at various colleges. And his mom, and they actually set up a separate email account just for that. So think about this. After she buried Donovan, she actually buried Donovan in the backyard. I don't know if you saw that bird bath. That's actually where Donovan's buried, in the backyard. Okay, because that's their only son. And so the parents were like, I don't want to go to a cemetery and visit my only son. And so they buried him in the backyard so they could see him every day. And Martha actually goes out every day and has coffee with her son and every night she says goodnight. So the reason why I tell this story to you is that when we get behind the wheel of a car, sometimes we're not thinking about the people that we affect by our actions. Does that make sense? Okay? So I want you to think about that. Donovan and the boys in the backseat didn't have the seatbelt on. Danica, when she said goodbye to Martha and said goodbye to all of them and they headed out to the movies, they didn't think that they were going to involve in a crash. Nobody does. Okay? Nobody anticipates or wants to be involved in a crash. Okay? But there's things that you can do to prevent it, and that's what we're talking about today. We want you to really take an eye-opening look at how, when you guys are passengers in cars, what could you have done? The passengers in the cars, what could they have done to prevent this? What could you have done? If you were one of the three boys in the back seat, what could you have done? Wear your seatbelt. Perfect. Love that answer. What else? Speak up, right? Say something. Hey, Danica, slow down. Right? That would have been a simple, just speaking up, having yourself heard. Say something. Sometimes we're afraid to say something in a car full of friends. Okay? But one of the interesting topics, and the reason why I bring this up, is you saw one of the slides where they're actually at the collision scene and they're all together. One of the things that Danica said is, why didn't any of you say something? And then one of the boys in the back seat said, you know what, I was really scared too. These are football players. All three boys were football players. Okay? So I know it's hard to speak up. I know it's a challenge. But you don't want to be one of those. You don't want to be one of these statistics. So you really do have to speak up. Okay? Let me show you another one here. Okay. Alright, so we hear this term, #1 killer of teens in America. 4,000 of your peers die annually due to reckless or distracted driving. 4,000. Okay? So that would be equivalent to all of our wars put together, like let's look at Afghanistan. Okay? All the soldiers that died. We lose that amount in 1 year of your peers in this country. That's alarming. That's scary. As a father of someone your age who is right now getting ready to take his written, that scares me. Okay? And it should really alarm all of you. Okay? If you look at this right here, it's hard to see, but I'm going to describe it to you. Hopefully I do a good job of it. But these white dots that make up the skull, okay, that's about 3,700, something around there, teenagers that have died in traffic collisions in 1 year between the age of 15 and 19. 15. That's the age of some of you in this room. They're not even driving, but they're driving. And that's where we come with the term speak up, because these are 15-year-old passengers dying in car crashes that could have been 100% preventable by wearing the seatbelt, by saying something, by voicing their concerns, by saying, stop this freaking car and let me out. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay? So that's something that could be prevented. This is annually. You saw one of the slides that says it's more than drugs and suicide put together. So if you look at, it's hard to see, but so this is car collisions, drugs and suicide are right here, these different colors. If you combine drugs and suicides in 1 year for 15 and 19-year-olds, it's still half of what teenagers dying in traffic collisions. Half. So that's very alarming. The reason why I bring this up is, how many of you have heard that the state legislature was thinking about raising the driving age? That's on the internet, and it's been on the internet, just so you know, it's been on the internet for 15 years. That's how old that is. That's an old rumor. Okay? So I'm going to tell you right now, we are nowhere near that. We will never do that, because here's the logic behind it. If we're going to raise the driving age like New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, all the eastern states, and raise the driving age to 18, would we solve the problem, this problem? No. You actually would be deferring it. You would be pushing it to 18. So instead of 15 to 19-year-olds, I would have 18 to 21-year-olds dying at $4,000 a year. Does that make sense? So the big thing for us, so Craig and I, the big thing for us is to educate. To have you change this behavior. Okay, that is the best way to do it. Through education and training, that's the way to change it, not through just stick your head in the ground, raise the age, and say, oh look, you don't have that problem anymore. No, you still have the problem, you just moved it down a little bit. You haven't addressed it. So our logic here in California is address it through education and training and through input from all of you. This program changes every year. As your teacher knows, it's changed several times since I've been teaching it. It's changed because of you. Comments that we get from you, input that I get from you, and I tweak this around. I get rid of videos, I throw videos away, I get rid of stats, I get rid of charts, I do all kinds of different things because if it doesn't reach you and if it's not helping you, then I throw it out. Just like any other good teacher. Okay? So that's what I want to share with you is this is something that all of you can impact. This is something that all of you can do to change. Okay, so this is going to be very interesting. So this is what we came up with in the state legislature called GDL, Graduated Driver's License. That's what all of you are doing now. Okay? So all of you are within the next 6 months, or you currently have your learner's permit. Okay, so let's talk about that real quickly. So your learner's permit, is it a license? No. It is just a permit to permit you to drive with a licensed driver over the age of 25. Okay, so the licensed driver has to be over the age of 25. So you can't have an aunt, uncle drive with you if they're 25 because they've got to have a driver's license. Okay, that's really important. So the person in the car with you has to have a driver's license. So your permit is in effect a link to their driver's license. Does that make sense? Okay, so keep that in mind. That's the learner's permit. Now, I always get this question, what if, and this happens a lot, what if I drive by myself on my learner's permit? What happens? And I get caught. What happens? Who can tell me too? It's taken away, it's revoked. How long is it revoked for? Go ahead. Exactly, until you're 18. Okay, so don't take that chance. If your learner's permit is revoked, it's revoked until you're 18. We don't want that to happen to you. Follow the rules of the learner's permit. When we got our learner's permit, it was easy. It was just a little small, tiny little piece of paper. You can fold it up and put in your wallet. Your learner's permit now is what? It's a stack of papers. Why is that? Because there's been so many of your peers driving by themselves on a learner's permit. And what is a typical response when we pull them over? I didn't know. Nobody told me. And so what we did is we said, okay, now we're going to put it all in writing. Okay? So it's all out there. So you can never use the term, I didn't know. Because you've got it now with you. Alright? So keep that in mind. Do you need to have your learner's permit on your person when you're operating the car? Yes. Okay, another thing, for those of you that are getting your learner's permit in 6 months, or like my son, remember your learner's permit is not valid until it's signed off by a driving school instructor. That's a big one. Because back in the day for us, and even your teacher, when I got my learner's permit, my parents said, okay, let's drive and go get dinner. And I would get in the car and drive. Okay, you can't do that anymore. You actually have to take your learner's permit, that stack of papers, go to a driving school, and actually get it signed. There's a place for the driving school instructor to sign it. So it's not valid until the driving school instructor signs it off. Okay, that's a big one. A lot of people get mistaked, get in trouble with, forget about. Okay, and it's not your fault because what your parents, myself included, we were able to do that. So this is a new law. This is a new change. So that's where you're going to have to educate your parents and say, whoa, 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 mom, dad, whatever, hey, I can't drive you're going to have to drive us until we can get it signed off by the driving school instructor. Okay? So keep that in mind. That's a big change because her parents never had that restriction. Yeah, go ahead. If you lose your permit, not a big deal. I think it's like $7. You go get a copy. Go down and you can go to the DMV. You don't even have to wait in line. You just go right to the area where you took your test. Say, I lost my permit. I just need a copy. No big deal. Really simple. Okay? Provisional license. Okay? That is what all of you will get after your permit is. How long do you have to have your permit for? 6 months. How many hours does your parents have to drive with you? 50 hours, right. 10 of which is at night. Very good. So he's right. Okay? 40 and 10. Okay, so, but it's 50 hours total they have to sign off on. Okay? Now, when you pass the behind the wheel test, and you guys have got it really easy now, because there's no more freeway driving, and there's no more parallel parking. I mean, I don't know, they're like giving the licenses away to you guys now. I mean, it's really simple. The parallel parking was the hardest part, at least for me. Okay? You guys got it off easy. You got to do a 3-point turn, blah, 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 and you're done. Okay? Alright, so, I mean, I don't know how easier it's going to get. Alright? So once you get your license, it's provisional. Why do we call it provisional? Anyone know? Go ahead.
If you don't have the full provisional license yet.
Right. So one of the things is it's easier for us to take your license away. On a provisional license, we can suspend your license with just a letter. Just get a letter in the mail. Hello, Mr. So-and-so. You've gotten 3 points in the past 6 months, so your license is now suspended. Thank you very much, DMV. And you'll have the license in your wallet, but it's going to show up in our computer system as suspended. Okay? That's how easy it is to suspend a provisional license. For us, we actually get a hearing. So if someone wants to take away my license or your teacher's license, we have a right to a hearing within 20 days. It's an actual, you go to a building, you plead your case, Your Honor, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I need my driver's license for blah, 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 and then they usually will give you a restricted license, like to and from work or to and from school or something like that. Okay? You get at least a hearing. With you guys on provisional, there is no hearing. It's a letter, and you're suspended. The other provision, the big killer provision, is your license is controlled by your parents. Mom and dad can suspend your license immediately with just a walk to the DMV. They walk into the DMV and say, Mary Jane has just been not cooperating today, so I want her license taken away. Done. Thank you. It's a literally a 3x5 card, filled out, done. So you could be at school. Oops, sorry. You could be at school, with the car in the school parking lot. Your license is in your back pocket, and your license is immediately suspended. Okay? So what do we learn on that one? Yeah. Don't piss off mom and dad. Okay? Because that is another big provision. All right? Now, what we are telling mom and dad, and we're telling the parents, is once they do this or exercise their right of revoking your license, you can't get your license back until you're 18. So we tell them this is the path, this is the last resort. If you do this, you can't say, oh, she's fantastic, she's my little angel again, and everything's great. Because remember, DMV employees are not social workers. They're not school counselors. They're not here to mediate family disputes. Okay? So once it happens, mom and dad can't take it back. Do you see what I mean? So we are telling mom and dad that as well. If they do that, they can't take it back. Alright? So keep that in mind. And then you get your full license. Now, when does this occur between provisional and full? Yes, sir?
18. 21.
21. If you look at this, your license will be in this, what we call portrait mode. So it'll look like this. And then when you turn 21, your driver's license will look like this, which is landscape mode. Okay? So that occurs at 21. So when you turn 21, it goes like that. All right? So keep that in mind, because all of you will get a license that has a red stripe right across the front. That's one of your provisions, saying you turn 21 at that age. I mean, at that year. Okay? So keep that in mind. That's your last provision. And I'll talk about what that provision means. Yes, go ahead, sir.
So you're a legal adult at 18, right?
Correct.
So then why do your parents still have provision over your license?
They don't. Thank you. I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you very much. That stipulation actually ends at 18. So all the restrictions and certain provisions end at 18. Your last, but you do not come off the provisional license until you're 21. Your last provision of your license is that red stripe. When that comes off, then your license goes this way. Does that make sense? So that's a good point. Let's say you're 17 and a half when you get your license. Do you have 1 year's worth of restriction or just 6 months? 6 months. So you only have 6 months of restrictions or 6 months of that certain provision, okay? So keep that in mind. All right, so when you turn 18, a lot of the restrictions from provisions come off except for the last one, which is 21. Now I need to talk to you about that one. So on that provision, the 21 provision, this is really important that you should know this because a lot of your peers at the university level are losing their licenses for years. Plural, okay? Your last provision says that if you are stopped by a police officer, okay, or a public safety officer. They threw that in there too. Because USC has what? Public safety. They don't have campus police. They're unarmed. They're non-sworn. Okay, so USC is non-sworn. They're public safety officers. So if you get stopped by a police officer or a public safety officer and you're asked to blow into this device, okay, and you say anything but no, I mean anything but yes, and you say no, it's an automatic license revocation for 1 year. That's your last provision. That's why we put that's your last 21-year-old provision. Anyone under the age of 21 must submit to a preliminary, which is a portable breath testing device. That's the one that the officers carry in the field, not the one in the jail. The breath testing device at the jail, everybody has to submit to that. Teachers, all adults have to submit to that, including you. You actually have an additional provision, which is the portable one, the smaller one, in the field. Okay? So that is a very key critical point. Remember that. So if you go to university, if you go to any university here in California, or if you're anywhere in California and you're stopped and you're asked to submit to a portable breath testing device, you cannot say no. You are already giving your consent. You've already agreed to it. When you guys signed your license application, how many of you read the back? None of you did. But you all signed box 12. Box 12, inside that signature box says, I agree to all the terms and conditions on the back of this form. And on the back of the form is this little thing that we just talked about. Okay? So keep that in mind. Alright? Now I sound like a teacher because I am a teacher. I actually teach at Pierce College. So what do you think a lot of my college students say to me? Oh, Professor Tang, I got pulled over and I said no and what do I say? Sucks to be you, but okay? Alright? I don't want to be cold and insensitive, but alright? Just remember, that's why I'm trying to save you the heartache and the grief. Alright? Because it's going to happen. I know it's going to happen. Okay, not only do I teach on a college campus, I did go to college. Okay? I went to San Diego State in the 80s. What does that tell you? Ask your parents what San Diego State was like in the 80s. They'll probably laugh and chuckle. Okay? Alright? Full license. Alright? Your full license, you get that at 21. Alright, so just remember that. Alright, so I'm going to play a nice little video. It gives you an idea of the whole process for those of you that are getting your permits in 6 months. Those of you that have your permits, it will give you a little bit of insight as well. Okay?
So, kids getting a driver license, huh? Ah! Clear the roads! Seriously though, it's scary stuff. Your new driver hurling down the freeway, to say nothing of the insurance hike. Whoo boy. But really, look at the statistics. Drivers between the ages of 15 and 19 are much more likely to experience a collision. You don't want that. I don't want that. Heck, the government doesn't want that. And that's why states nationwide have adopted graduated driver licensing regulations. I know, it sounds complicated, but don't worry, I'm here to help. Welcome to graduated driver licensing made simple. Now, each state has its own set of specific rules and regulations. But today, we're taking a look at California. Meet Daniel and his mom, Kay. They're about to start on the great adventure of the GDL. Daniel turned 15 and a half yesterday. In California, this means he's just old enough to apply for his learner permit. To do this, he needs to complete or be enrolled in driver education and driver training. Fortunately, he finished his driver education class last week and is currently halfway through his driver training course. He and his mom have even spent time together studying this year's California Driver Handbook. All they have to do now is head down to the local DMV, where they'll both sign off on his permit paperwork, and he'll take the written driver exam. 46 harrowing questions later, Daniel has passed his test, and is a proud learner permit recipient. Now, the fun part. Daniel needs to clock 50 hours of supervised driving time, 10 of which have to be at night, with his mom, a driving instructor, or another licensed adult over the age of 25. Kay will need to sign off on paperwork stating that Daniel has indeed been practicing his lane changes and three-point turns. Oh yeah, she'll also be keeping track of Daniel, logging his day and night driving hours too. The supervised driving period is really important because it gives experienced drivers a chance to make sure that their protege is learning excellent safety practices behind the wheel. Now that he's got his permit, Daniel needs to spend 6 months working on his driving abilities under his mom's watchful eye, before moving on to the next phase. Meet Amanda and her uncle Jason. Amanda is 16 years old, and just spent the last 6 months learning Jason's best tips and tricks for how to pull off the perfect parallel parking job, among other vital rules of the road. She's now ready to embark on that rite of passage, the road test. She and Jason head to the DMV, where Amanda will show off her shiny new driving skills. With a passing score here, she'll enter the intermediate stage of the GDL. Now, she can finally strike out on her own in that brand new Mercedes. Yeah, or whatever. She may be allowed to drive solo now, but there are still safety restrictions on her intermediate license. Until she's spent a year with an intermediate license, or until she turns 18, she can't drive between the hours of 11 p.m. and 5 a.m., or drive with other passengers under the age of 20, unless accompanied by a licensed adult over the age of 25. These restrictions are in place to minimize risks and distractions and maximize the experience the new driver gets. Amanda knows it's important to stay alert and aware while she's driving, because the law has specific provisions for intermediate drivers. Repeated accidents or injuries caused by drivers with an intermediate license carry fines, and can even result in their license being suspended for an additional 12 months. After 1 year of safe driving with an intermediate license, the state's safety restrictions will be lifted. Congratulations! At this point, Amanda is a fully licensed, unrestricted, ready-to-go driving machine. So, let's recap. In California, at age 15 and a half, you can start working toward your provisional driver license by following these steps. Complete driver education and be enrolled in or complete driver training class before applying for your learner permit. Study the driver handbook with a parent or guardian, then take the written driver exam at the DMV. Pass the test, and you'll receive your learner permit. After getting your learner permit comes 6 months of practice time, where you'll drive with adult supervision for 50 hours, 10 of them at night. At 16, you can head to the DMV for the road test. Once you pass the test, the intermediate license phase begins. You can now drive solo, as long as you follow the intermediate license restrictions. You cannot drive between the hours of 11 p.m. and 5 a.m., or with anyone under 20 in your car, unless there's a licensed adult over 25 present. After 1 year with an intermediate license, or when you turn 18, the restrictions will be lifted. Hopefully this handy guide has helped you make sense of the ins and outs of graduated driver licensing. For more information and specific rules for your own state, check out impactteendrivers.org. Happy driving!
So what do you think? Was that good? A lot of my students say they like this because it's pretty informative and it gives you all the things that you need to know. Now, one of the things that I get a lot from your parents, especially at this campus, has to do with passengers. I get a lot of calls on this. So here, I'm going to share it with you, what I'm telling them, so that you can reaffirm. You should not have passengers for the first year. Even if it's a sibling, they cannot write you a note. I've been telling them this up and down, forwards and backwards. Okay? You can write a note to transport a sibling if you live in a rural area that is not serviced by public transportation. Okay? So let's say you live on a farm in the middle of nowhere. Okay? There's no bus. It even takes you, like, what? 3 blocks just to walk to the road from your house. Okay? Yeah. Then your parents could write a note and you could transport your sibling to school. Does that make sense? But since we live in a metropolitan area, a lot of areas don't qualify for that. Even Malibu has public transportation. They have a bus. Okay? So keep that in mind. So most of you, unless you live in a rural area, if you're living in Ojai and you're commuting here, okay, yeah, you can have your parents write you a note. Okay? But for the most part, most of you live in this city or close by, or you live in a metropolitan area, you cannot have your parents write you a note. Okay? Also, additionally, the note has to be written daily. How many parents want to write a note every day? Okay? There was something on a parent blog on this campus that said, oh, you can just write one note for the entire school year. Can't do that. Okay? So you have, if you qualify, it has to be written every day, and it has to be a phone number where your parents can be reached at, so we can verify the note. Okay? Does that make sense? All right, it's really important because we're having a lot of misinformation on that. Okay? Now, let's say you have some cousins that are coming to stay with you over the summer, and you have your license and you've had it for 3 months, and your cousins are 20 and 21. Can they be in the car with you? Yes. Yes. Passengers over the age of 20, right? If the passengers are under the age of 20, then you must have a licensed driver over the age of 25. Okay? So if you have family members that you want to drive, that are coming to visit or hang out with you, or if you have friends that are 20 or 21, yeah, they can be in the car with you. Even if you've had your license for a day, 2 days, you can have those passengers. Does that make sense? Now, no one's even asked the reason why. Why? Why do we have this passenger restriction? Anyone know? What's the biggest distraction in the car? Passengers. If I put your best friend and you in a car together, is it going to be quiet? No, of course not. If you and your best friend are in a car together, you guys are going to be talking. You're going to have fun. You're going to be doing what you guys do when you guys are together. It's only logical. So, knowing that, that's the reason why we restrict it for the first year, so that it gets you introduced to driving. You've had your license for a day, a month, a week. We need you to have more experience. That's why another thing that we do is we actually go to PTA and parent groups, and we tell your parents they need to drive. It's not enough to have them get their license. They need to actually go out and have hours behind the wheel. Okay? An hour here, an hour there, 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there is not going to work. You should be driving at least a minimum of 2 hours a day. Okay? If you really wanted to make this program work, at least 2 hours a day. Do you know how many parents roll their eyes when I say that? A lot. Okay? But just keep that in mind. You can tell them I said it. It's on videotape. They're going to play this. I'm saying they need to do at least 2 hours a day. Okay? Alright. Any questions on that, you guys? Yeah, I'm going to show you this story here. Now, the voice is not Amanda.
Amanda Clark.
And I don't think you've seen this either. Okay?
Nice.
And this is
honest,
her diary.
caring,
So someone's
trustworthy.
reading her diary.
who needs friends, compassion, love, who feels anger and compassion, who fears death and being alone, who is concerned about my family and my future. Most people that I know, like, if they're older than you, they don't really want to be friends with you, but Amanda was like my best friend.
She was fun to be with. You know, she had that certain smile that made everybody smile.
You'd be in a bad mood and she'd just smile. And it would make you want to smile along with her.
Oh, I so bright lit up the room every time she walked in.
If there could be one thing that I could change in my life, it would be the ability to see my family more than I do. I really enjoy spending time with my family and miss them. I want to see them and spend as much time with them as I can. I hate the thought of dying without my family knowing how I felt about them.
March 31st, 2006. Amanda had spent the day in Antigua. It had rained all day, and I just had an odd feeling. Amanda stayed in Antigua. She said, no, Mom, I want to come home. So she headed home, and we took a different route than she normally did. And she was on her cell phone.
Talking, trying to find out where she was going, where she was at. And she assumed, well, the person who told her on the phone assumed that it was a four-way stop, which it was not.
It was just past 7 p.m. when I went through the stop sign. My car rolled 3 times, and the only part of the roof that wasn't caved in was the part over my head. I know I'm lucky to be alive.
I thought this would be a wake-up call for her. It was for a short period of time. She wouldn't talk on the phone. She was more cautious. But she got more confident in her driving again, in the sense of, hey, I survived one. I'm invincible. Nothing's going to happen to me now.
I believe everything happens for a reason, and the reason for my car accident is to let me know that I need to slow down and pay more attention. I know that I need to change how I've been living my life. My phone and talking to my friends put my life in danger. I realize how easy it is for my life to be over because I wasn't paying attention. I'm glad to have one more chance to prove myself.
On April 1st, 2007, we received an emergency response call to the area of 120 and I-5. Upon arrival, we found a car that had gone over the embankment and a person pinned inside.
The first responders came to the hospital too and informed us that it took 40 minutes to get her out of the car. And for 20 of those minutes she wasn't breathing. I know a person cannot survive without oxygen for that length of time. But as a mother, I couldn't let go. I had to hold on to any shred of hope. I want to tell her story. I need for everybody to hear it. And one thing I tell teenagers is, when you get in that car, think of Amanda.
That phone call can wait, because it's just not your life, it's somebody else's life that you're going to hurt.
Cell phones being used in cars, it's a selfish act, because you're putting not only your life in your hands, but everybody on the road with you. And that are the chances you take every time you pick up that phone when you're behind the wheel.
Teenagers nowadays, they think that they were invincible, that they can talk on a cell phone and drive. They don't realize how dangerous it is.
Amanda would say that phone call's not worth it.
There's no text that you come across or no information that would be more important than being able to hug your daughter or greet your son or celebrate their birthday. Kids just tend not to realize how important that is to us as parents.
goodbye to their child.
So I had Bonnie down here 4 months ago for a TV spot that we did for NBC News. And I asked her that last scene, we see her sitting in Amanda's room, and she says, yes, 7 years later, I haven't touched a thing in that room. I just dust it, I clean it. I haven't even washed the linens. She says, Amanda's room is exactly the way it was left 7 years ago. Okay, so I share this with you because when we have to deal with stuff like this, it's your parents, okay, that we deal with. And it's hard on us. And so that's why I like to show this, because we always get caught up in all the things that we're doing. We get caught up in our lives, and sometimes we forget that there are loved ones that are affected by our actions. So that's where we like to show this video with you guys, okay? So just understand, it's huge. I mean, I'm dealing with one right now. I'm dealing with the Oakwood School, okay? And I'm dealing with the aftermath of that. How many of you know what happened with the Oakwood School? Private school, North Hollywood. 3 girls, 14, 15 years of age, crossing the crosswalk on their way back to campus, and somebody in a Prius lost control and took them out. They were in the crosswalk. And I'm dealing with the parents. We are dealing with the parents right now. Okay? So one girl will probably walk with a limp for the rest of her life. The other is still on life support. And so these are things that we deal with all the time. So when we have an opportunity to share with you, to have you change your actions and change the way you drive, Amanda had that. You saw. She had her first collision. And she is so lucky to be alive. She should have died that first one with a 4-way stop sign. Okay? Why the car didn't cave in, the roof didn't cave in over her head at that spot, nobody will know. We can't even explain. Okay, so she was lucky. So a year later, to the day, she gets into another crash. She's not so lucky. That's the thing that we're trying to share with you. Okay? So keep that in mind. All right, so recapping. Make good decisions. Speak up. We want you to speak up, okay? Everything we talked about today is preventable. 100% of it's preventable. Every one of the teens that you saw there that have passed away would be alive today, okay? So speak up. Everyone in the car has a responsibility. I love this one. Okay? We're teaching this motto even to middle school students. Speak up. You have a responsibility, not just the driver has a responsibility, but you do too. Okay? Any questions? No? Somebody's going to have something to say. Okay. Yes?
Okay, I have a permit right now. So I'll get my license sometime in the next few months, or later, next few months, or a while.
Right.
And so by the time I'm like a senior, because we're all sophomores, I will have like my license will be unrestricted. But what happens when I go to college? I'll be 19 at the time, and I'll be on the East Coast, so I'll be out of state.
Okay, so it depends on how you do it. So let's say I'll give you a good scenario. This happened.